Welcome back to Silent Crime Case, where we uncover the darkest and most mysterious stories hidden in everyday life. Today we take you to Brookhaven, Alabama, a town that seemed peaceful until the brutal murder of Matthew Wells, a beloved local businessman, shocked the entire community. What seemed like a perfect life was hiding secrets of obsession, betrayal, and a violent end. As we explore this tragic case, keep an eye out for the clues that point to something far more sinister beneath the surface. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single detail of this chilling story. Matthew Wells was the type of man everyone in Brookhaven knew. He was 52 years old, the owner of Wells Hardware, a business that had been a fixture in the town for over 15 years. Wells Hardware wasn't just a place to buy tools, it was the heart of the community. Locals would stop by for advice on fixing things around their homes, or simply to chat with Matthew, who always greeted customers with a warm smile and an easy demeanor. But lately something had changed in Matthew. His once cheerful nature had begun to fade, and though his polite smile remained, there was an undeniable weariness behind his eyes. His hands trembled when he thought no one was looking, and his conversations with customers seemed rushed, as if his mind was elsewhere. Some thought it was just the pressure of the holiday season, but a few regulars noticed that Matthew had been avoiding eye contact more often, speaking in vague, distracted tones. Those who had known him for years started to suspect that something was wrong. The cheerful facade of a perfect life was beginning to crack. Did Matthew's behavior raise any red flags for you? What do you think could have been weighing on his mind? Let us know in the comments. As is often the case, appearances can be deceiving, and Matthew Wells was no exception. Behind the friendly, upstanding image, Matthew was hiding a dark secret. For months he had been having an affair with Emily Peterson, a 19-year-old college freshman. Emily had started visiting Wells Hardware to get supplies for her school projects. And soon, what began as innocent conversations blossomed into something much more. Emily was a young woman with a troubled past. She had grown up in a broken home, her father having left when she was just a child. Emily's relationship with her mother had always been strained. Her mother was distant, more concerned with her own problems than with raising her daughter. As a result, Emily had always longed for stability, for someone who would provide the care and attention she had been denied as a child. When she met Matthew, a man much older than her and seemingly settled in life, she saw him as the father figure she had never had, and later as much more. Her vulnerability made her an easy target for emotional entanglement. But was Matthew truly an innocent victim in all of this? Some suggest he may have played on Emily's vulnerability, using her youth and emotional neediness to satisfy his own desires. The power imbalance in their relationship could have allowed Matthew to manipulate Emily, leaving her to believe that she was more important in his life than she really was. Was Matthew leading her on, giving her hope for a future that was never going to happen? Or was Emily seeing things that weren't there? For Matthew, the affair was an escape from the monotony of his life and the growing distance in his marriage to Sarah Wells. Matthew had been married to Sarah for almost 30 years, and though their relationship had once been full of love and warmth, it had gradually grown colder. Sarah was heavily involved in their local church, spending hours organizing charity events and community gatherings. While Sarah poured her energy into the community, Matthew had started to feel more like an outsider in his own home. At first, the affair with Emily was thrilling for Matthew, an exciting distraction from his day-to-day routine. They attended church together every Sunday, hosted community dinners at their home, and were often seen at local events side by side. But behind closed doors, their relationship had become distant and strained. Sarah had noticed that Matthew was acting strangely in recent months. He was spending more time at the store, working late into the night, and when he was home, he seemed preoccupied, his mind elsewhere. Sarah often lay awake at night, wondering what had changed between them. Was it work stress? Had she done something wrong? She couldn't pinpoint what was causing the growing gap between them, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She wanted to ask him directly, but Matthew had become elusive, avoiding any deep conversations. At the same time, Emily's obsession was deepening. She began showing up unexpectedly at Matthew's store, sending cryptic messages about their future together. She even drove past his house late at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Her thoughts had become dark, consumed by fantasies of what their life could be if Sarah were no longer in the picture. Emily's obsession had taken on a dangerous edge, and her fixation on Matthew was spiraling out of control. Have you ever experienced a time when someone you loved seemed to be drifting away? What did you do about it? We'd love to hear your stories. December 20th, 2021 was a cold and quiet morning in Brookhaven. Most of the town's residents were busy with their holiday shopping and final Christmas preparations. Sarah Wells had just returned from Brookhaven Baptist Church, where she had been volunteering for the Christmas Eve service preparations. She pulled into the driveway of their modest home and noticed something odd. Matthew's truck was parked outside. He had told her earlier that he'd be running errands for the store. Why was he back so soon? Meanwhile, earlier that morning, Emily had been sitting in her car outside Matthew's house. She had been there for over an hour, her hands shaking as she tried to work up the courage to go inside. She knew Matthew would be home. The messages they had exchanged the night before had been heated, full of accusations and pleas. He had tried to break things off, but Emily wasn't ready to let go. Not yet, not ever. Her mind was racing, her thoughts a jumble of rage, desperation, and longing. As Sarah stepped inside the house, she was immediately struck by the eerie stillness. Normally, Matthew would be watching TV, or the house would be filled with the sound of Christmas music. But today there was nothing. The only sound was the gentle hum of the heater and the scent of fresh pine from the Christmas tree. Everything seemed normal, except that Matthew wasn't answering when she called out to him. That's when she saw him. Matthew Wells was lying on the floor near the Christmas tree, his head covered in blood. Blood was splattered across the presents beneath the tree, staining the carpet, and even some of the ornaments hanging on the branches. A hammer lay next to his body, soaked in blood. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mind struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. The festive decorations around her now seemed grotesque in the face of such brutal violence. Panic surged through her as she reached for her phone and called 911. Her voice trembled as she spoke to the operator, struggling to explain what had happened. "My husband. There's blood everywhere. I think he's dead. Please help me," she sobbed, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Sarah's world had just been shattered. Within minutes, the quiet streets of Brookhaven were filled with flashing lights and police sirens. Detective Olivia Carter, a seasoned investigator with over 15 years of experience, arrived on the scene and immediately sensed that this was no ordinary murder. The brutal nature of the crime pointed to something deeply personal. This wasn't a random act of violence. What do you think Sarah was feeling at that moment? Shock? Betrayal? Let us know your thoughts on how this kind of discovery would affect someone. The investigation into Matthew's murder began immediately. Detective Carter and her team meticulously combed through the house, searching for clues. The hammer, which appeared to be the murder weapon, was quickly bagged and sent for forensic analysis. But there was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no doors kicked in. Whoever had entered the Wells home that night had likely been let in willingly. As Detective Carter examined the scene, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye. The festive decorations clashed violently with the sea. Could this affair have been the motive for murder? Do you think Emily could have been pushed to this extreme? Or is there more to this story than just the affair? Leave your theories below. Emily Peterson was brought in for questioning, and at first she appeared calm and composed. She told detectives that she had known Matthew for about a year, and that he had been helping her with her school projects. But as Detective Carter pressed her for more details, Emily's calm facade began to crack. Under pressure, Emily confessed to having an affair with Matthew, but there was something off about her story, something that didn't quite add up. Emily began to describe how her relationship with Matthew had consumed her. She admitted that she had fallen deeply in love with him and had grown increasingly possessive. She would text him constantly, sometimes hundreds of times a day, demanding to know where he was and who he was with. Emily's words became more frantic as she described her growing obsession with Matthew. She couldn't stand the thought of him being with his wife, Sarah. In her mind, Sarah was the only thing standing in the way of their future together. Then came the most shocking part of Emily's confession. On the night of December 19th, just one day before Matthew's body was found, Emily had gone to his house. She was desperate to talk to him, to know whether their relationship was really over. They had argued, and Matthew told her that it was over, that he couldn't continue living this lie. Emily snapped. In a fit of rage, she grabbed a hammer that had been lying near the Christmas decorations and struck Matthew. But as Emily told her story, Detective Carter couldn't help but feel that there was more to it. Was this truly a crime of passion? Or had Emily planned this confrontation all along? There were details in her confession that didn't quite make sense. Why had she brought the hammer to the living room in the first place? And why had she waited so long to confess? Was Emily's confession a true crime of passion? Or do you think she had planned this all along? Share your thoughts below. The more the investigators looked into Emily's background, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary affair. Emily had become completely consumed by her relationship with Matthew. Text messages between the two revealed the depth of Emily's obsession. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Emily had sent Matthew dozens of desperate messages begging him not to leave her. She had even threatened to expose their affair if he didn't agree to be with her. But the most damning piece of evidence came in the form of a handwritten note found in Matthew's home. The note, written in Emily's handwriting, arranged a meeting between her and Matthew on the night of December 19th, the night before his murder. This note, combined with her confession and the obsessive text messages, painted a clear picture. Emily had planned to confront Matthew, and when things didn't go her way, she snapped. Emily Peterson was officially arrested and charged with the murder of Matthew Wells on December 26, 2021. The town of Brookhaven was in shock. Some believed that Matthew had manipulated Emily, using her youth and vulnerability to his advantage. Others felt that Emily's actions were the result of her own obsessive behavior and inability to accept rejection. The trial of Emily Peterson began in February 2022, and it quickly became the most talked-about event in Brookhaven. The courtroom was packed every day as people gathered to hear the details of the affair and the events leading up to Matthew's murder. The prosecution painted Emily as a young woman consumed by jealousy and rage, someone who couldn't handle the thought of losing the man she loved. They argued that Emily had gone to Matthew's house that night with the intention of killing him, bringing the hammer with her. On the other hand, Emily's defense team claimed that she had suffered a mental breakdown, driven by the fear of losing Matthew. They argued that her actions were not premeditated, but rather the result of emotional instability and overwhelming fear. After several weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On February 18, 2022, Emily Peterson was found guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, and Emily sat stone-faced, showing little emotion. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. For the town of Brookhaven, the trial had been a painful reminder that even in the quietest play. Thank you for joining us for this chilling story on Silent Crime Case. What do you think? Was Emily a victim of manipulation, or was she driven by her own obsession? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Stay safe and remember, sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones hiding the darkest secrets.